Hey and welcome back. And in this lesson, we are going to look at smooth shading and flat shading inside of Blender. So first of all, I'm going to delete my camera and my light. So select them, press X on the keyboard, delete. So in Blender and most other 3D applications, you have a smooth shade option and also a flat shading option. Now, there are many ways to smooth out an object inside of a 3D application. You can add a whole lot of extra geometry to make it more smooth, or you can use something like a subsurf modifier. And we're going to look at the subsurf modifier later on in this course. But for now, I'm going to show you a way that kind of fakes the way that objects are displayed. So they will look smooth, but the actual geometry is not really smooth. So this is really handy if you are creating low poly models for maybe like a game, or you're taking it from Blender to Unreal or to Unity or any other gaming engine. It's always good to work with as low poly meshes as possible. And that is where smooth shading comes in quite handy. Now, it doesn't work on everything. You can't really just add smooth shading to any object in your scene because it won't look right. So let me show you an example. So this cube, if I right click on this cube, you'll see that we have shade smooth and shade flat. Now, if I click on shade smooth, you'll see something will happen and we will get this kind of smooth shading. And it looks quite interesting, but it doesn't look right because we can't see these edges on this cube. And yeah, it just doesn't look right. So I can now right click again and set this back to shade flat. And now I can see we can see those hard edges again, which looks right. So obviously for a cube, you're not going to add that. So I'm going to delete this cube, just X and then delete. And then I'm going to add a cylinder. So I'm going to go Shift A. And or let's add a UV sphere first. So I'm going to select UV sphere, and as you can see, we have this UV sphere. You can obviously click on this add UV sphere panel here at the bottom, and you can increase your segments. And as you can see, that will smooth it out. Also the rings, increase that. But this way, we'll just add all this geometry. If I open up edit mode, if I click tab, you'll see that it's got all of these faces and all of these geometry that's just extra geometry that you don't maybe really need. And as you can see right here at the bottom, it tells us that we have 17,538 faces currently. So that's a lot of geometry just for a simple sphere. So I'm going to delete this again, and I'm going to add the sphere back as default. So UV sphere. And in the settings, I'm going to change the segments back to 32 and the rings to 16. So that's kind of the default geometry if you add a UV sphere. And I can see obviously it's not smooth at all. You can see all the faces. If I go into edit view, you can see we have a lot less faces and vertices and edges. And if we have a look at the bottom here, we can see that we only have 512 faces, which is a lot better than something like 17,000 or whatever it was. So with a sphere selected, you can now right click, and I can go shade smooth, and instantly you can see we have this amazing smooth looking sphere. Now if you look closely to the edge of our sphere, you can see it's not really smooth. You can actually see those corners, and if I click on it, you can actually see it a little bit better. So it's kind of like a little bit of an illusion. It changes the way how the light is interacting with those flat faces. So it's kind of a way of cheating something to look smooth inside of any 3D application. So if I export this sphere now to, let's say, to Unreal Engine, Unreal Engine will read that smooth shading and it will keep that smooth look. So a really cool way to save on geometry if you're trying to keep your poly count low. So if I select this again, you can right click again and set flat. So you can easily just change between that because it's not really changing the actual geometry. It's kind of just faking it. So I'm going to delete this sphere. And let's say we want to add a cylinder. So I'm going to do Shift A, Mesh, and then I'm going to add a cylinder. Now I can see a cylinder. You can also change the settings here at the bottom to increase it, but I'm going to leave it on 32 for now. Now a cylinder is quite interesting because I want the sides to be smooth, But if I just select my cylinder and I right click and go shade smooth, you'll see this is going to happen. So the side of our cylinder is actually looking pretty good. You can see it's nice and smooth. But if you look at it from an angle, you can't see this edge going past here at the top and the same at the bottom. It looks kind of weird. It doesn't look right. So the way you want to do this is you want to go into edit mode first and then only apply the smooth shading to a specific area of your object. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to right click on this cylinder again, and I'm going to set it back to shade flat, back to normal, so you can see we can see that edge again, which is good. So now with this cylinder selected, I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode. And now what I want to do is I want to select everything but the top and the bottom face. So I want to select all these faces going around in the center, but not select the top and the bottom. So some easy ways to do that with everything selected as it is. You can simply make sure you're on face select mode. So you can press 3 on the keyboard, and then you can do shift click on the top face and shift click on the bottom face to deselect them. You can see they are gray, they're not selected, and everything else is selected. Another way to do this is I'm just going to click to deselect everything. You can just drag a box like this, but just be careful. If you rotate around, you'll see that you have not selected any of the faces at the back. So you can do shift and just kind of shift and highlight them like so. Or another way will be is just to enable X-ray view here at the top and go to the side like a side view, and now you can just drag a box and that will select everything through that model. So you can see it's selecting everything through it. And now if we switch off this X-ray view, you can see that's also a perfect selection. Another way to do this is you can click on one of the faces and then you can control click on another one, and it's going to select everything in between. And now I can go all the way around, maybe to here, control click, and then control click again, like so. So many different ways to select those faces. And now with those faces around selected, I can right click and then I can go to shade smooth. So here at the bottom, shade smooth and shade flat, shade smooth. So now I'm going to go out of edit mode. So press tab on the keyboard. And now you can see that the side of this cylinder is nice and smooth, but we can still see that hard edge at the top and also at the bottom. So that's kind of what you want. Now, just be careful when using smooth shading on everything. You kind of need to have a reason that you are using it. So remember, for low poly assets, for gaming assets, for things like that, try and use smooth shading if that is the look that you're going for. If it's not the look you're going for, then maybe leave it on flat shading. And if you're not worried about your poly count, you can always just add a subsurface modifier. And we're going to look at that later, but as I said, that's going to add a lot of geometry to your scene. But if that's not something you are worried about, you may be making a very high density, high poly count model, then that's fine. Then you don't have to use the flat shading and the smooth shading at all. So yeah, play around with that, see how you can create different smooth shapes by using this smooth and flat shading inside of Blender. I will see you in the next lesson.